Well, from life, of course, but the Navy. I was a DJ on the radio. Went to lots of school. Community college, university, post-grad. Also teaching. I learn every time I teach you guys. I was a newspaper reporter for the school, but nonetheless, it was the same type of environment. I have a bachelor's in journalism. What I learned at that school is that I didn't want to do that for a career. That was also during the rapid decline of the newspaper industry. I worked at a TV news station, did everything behind the scenes that you can do. Editing video, running sound, playing tapes, cameraman, the works, everything but in front of the camera. I learned post-production sound, web design. I learned a lot from bike riding. And I also learned a lot from training clients. Now, I'm from a small desert town in Southern California. There's Los Angeles right there. 60 miles north is Lancaster. Has anybody ever heard of it? Whoa! Why? How have you heard of it? I grew up there. I lived there for 19 years. I worked at Magic Mountain. You've heard of that, right? About 40 miles away, fun little drive-through canyon. Nobody I ever worked with had ever heard of Lancaster. 40 minutes away, 4 miles away, one or the other. They hadn't heard of Lancaster at the time. So this is the 80s. Lancaster was not so small physically, but it was mentally. Very homogeneous. Nothing really changed. We didn't venture down to LA very often. Scary place, fast driving, rude driving. So kind of stayed in my little desert bubble there. I also came from a divorced parents who had me way too young. I'm trying to set the stage of the foundation of what made me here. And I was about 5 years old. They split up. I lived with my mom. We lived in a trailer. She was working all the time. I eventually became a latchkey kid. You know what that is? You know, she was at work, so I had a key. I would walk home by myself when I was too young. Nobody would think of doing that now. Let myself in and hang out and make my own foods and watch TV most of the day or play. And it's amazing I didn't get in trouble, but I was a pretty good kid. Of course, there certainly was trouble to be had. But the underlying point I want to make with this is that I didn't really have a lot of good role models. I didn't have a lot of inspiration or push for improvement. My mom was into mediocrity. Just get by with what you could. When I was in school, I didn't do any more than I had to. I didn't even learn to read very well. In fact, I remember when I was in junior high, I heard about a test that you could take to advance up a grade or two, depending on how well you did. And I wanted to take this. I hated school. It was boring. It just kids were too young. I was the same age as me, but I just felt that I was an adult, essentially, in a kid's body. And I really wanted to take this test and advance up. And I told my mom about it. I was so excited. I'm going to study for this. I'm going to learn a lot. I'm going to pass this test, jump up a grade. I'll get out of high school that much sooner. She didn't want me to do it. Well, you know, it's not going to hurt you and it's not going to take any of your time. I'll do it all on my own. She didn't want me to do it. That totally crushed me, which is funny because the reason she didn't want me to do it was because she didn't want me to try and fail and be crushed. So she crushed me instead. Now, how do you think that made me feel? So she didn't have the faith in me that I could do it, for one. And two, mediocrity. It's safe. It's comfortable. How many people are into mediocrity? A lot of your clients. We going into personal training here? Okay. A lot of the people you're going to work with eventually are comfortable with mediocrity. It's safe. It's comfortable. They know it. They don't have to stick their neck out. A lot of people don't feel about failure the way I do. I embrace it because every time I fail at something, I learn from it. Had I taken that test, had I taken that test and failed, I wouldn't have been crushed. I would have been inspired to work that much harder. So what did I do? I went the other way, and I sat back, and I goofed off, and I daydreamed in class, and I did the very, very, very bare minimum to get by. Not because I wasn't smart, because I wasn't inspired. My mom was also a hobby dietist, or a diet hobbyist. I always get those mixed up, how it should be said. So what that means is she would start a new diet on Monday, usually once a month, I would say, and she would follow this diet for 5 or 10 days, and then fall off it, and she would fall into a deep depression. She would buy a gallon of ice cream and sit on the couch and read People magazine and eat this entire thing of ice cream all at one time, because she was a failure, because she couldn't stick to the rigidity of this diet. Anybody know anybody like that? Has anybody ever been on a diet? Know anybody been on a diet? Nobody here's been on a diet? Yeah, a couple. And you've known people that have been on a diet. Have they ever succeeded long term? Has anybody ever seen anybody who succeeded long term on a diet? I have a poster on my wall that I made. Dieters never win. So once you get that mentality in your head, you'll stop going on diets and you start changing your lifestyle. So my first education about nutrition came from my mom, as she would start a new diet, and I said, well, what's so special about this one? 12, mind you, so I wasn't too academically minded, but she would tell me all about this diet and why it's going to be the one. And then, next month she would start a new one, and I would ask about that one, and sometimes I'd even read these diet books, and sometimes I would try them just to see what it's like to eat nothing but grapefruit and tuna for an entire day. I like both of those things, but I don't want to eat just that. I had some friends. I had some really good friends. They were best friends. I've never been one to have a lot of friends, but I would have like 1 or 2 best friends that I'd spend all my time with. The first were 2 brothers, 1 a year older, 1 a year younger than me, and we were great friends for a while, but they were troubled, had a troubled household. And though I lived with my mom and she wasn't a proactive parent, we'll say, these guys lived from a household that was not as loving as mine, and they kind of went to the dark side. They started shoplifting gum and candy from 7-Eleven, and then that sort of migrated into cigarettes, and then booze, and then started smoking pot and all this. And mind you, they're teenagers, young teenagers. So as they started doing that, the whole shoplifting, as soon as they did that, and I went to the store once and they wanted me to join them, and I wouldn't. I'm standing there basically just sort of staying away from them, so in case they got caught, I wouldn't be involved. And I distanced myself from them at that time, because I just didn't want any part of that. And I kept in contact, but they weren't coming back to they weren't moving away from the dark side. I saw their mom many years later, and they both had become heroin addicts, and they'd been in and out of prison. So I don't know what it was that kept me from following them, but I'm really thankful of it. I had another friend who, we had a lot of great times together. We were 2 peas in a pod. We did everything together. My best memories from childhood are with him. And when I moved up here 8 years ago from LA, I found out that he lived in Portland. And I looked him up and I talked to him on the phone. And he's still living like he's in high school. He's partying every day. He doesn't have a real steady job. He plays drums in a band. They travel around the world sometimes, but other times they're not. But he's essentially living like he's in high school. When I was in high school, I had been in band all of my life, up until the end of my freshman year. And it was at that point I wanted to try something different. I wanted to see what it was like outside of band. I was a drummer, so I wasn't a total band geek, but, still. So I fell in with the surfer partier types, and they weren't really bad, they weren't hardcore, but they weren't very academic. And by the time we got out of high school, we went to college, and it was just an extension of high school, and I knew I was going nowhere. I was ready for something to kick in. I was hoping college would have done it, community college. I was hoping that would have been different, but they lived their life going from one party to another. That's it. Every weekend was just looking for a party, and I just didn't see that as something I wanted to do. It's pretty boring. I'm not really a party type anyways, and so I needed something else. I wanted something different. This is obviously where I'm from, and so it looks a lot like that. There are some pretty areas, and in the springtime when they get rain, we get a lot of flowers. This is the college I went to, and it's also known, Antelope Valley is also known as Aerospace Valley. The space shuttle was built there. When I was in elementary school, I used to watch them test fly it. It would go up on the 747, they'd drop it off, and then it would glide down. There'd be military jets flying all over the place, so that's why they had this there. It was kind of cool. I was into aeronautics at the time. I needed to take major action. I spent one long, dull summer not hanging out with my friends, working most of the time, riding my bike 20 miles each direction on a lonely road through the desert with heavy thoughts in mind. Thoughts that involved going into the Navy. And it was a really big decision because once you sign up, you're in. 3 or 4 years, you're in. And there's really no way out. If you take a job or you move somewhere, you can bail at some point. I was weighing my options on what to do. Should I move? Where? San Diego? The East Coast? I didn't really see good success rate in any of those things. And I really knew I needed to clean up my act. I didn't have a lot of the life skills that I needed. I didn't necessarily verbalize this, but I knew it. I didn't have a lot of discipline. I didn't have a lot of organization. I had an innate drive. I knew I wanted more, but I didn't know how to get it. And this was essentially my first school. I went there and they did whip me into shape. I learned all those things I just mentioned. It was really a great experience. I wouldn't change it for anything. It certainly had its hard times. I mentioned that I learned endurance. I learned mental endurance and physical endurance. One time they had us working for 36 hours straight. No sleep, work constantly in the fire room, which is full of boilers, hot, doing things like chipping rust and scraping and painting and cleaning and getting inside the boiler and scraping the soot off of the pipes, come out black. And I was wearing my uniform, which was kind of similar to this in what it was, and then a bunny suit over that. And it would get through the bunny suit, through the clothes, and even through my underwear. So like 3 or 4 layers of clothing. After I washed myself, I had to take 3 separate showers because diesel oil soot is very oily. And you have to use a lot of soap, but you couldn't get it around your eye, so it looked like I had eyeliner on for a week afterwards. I learned a lot in the Navy. I was stationed, I went to school, boot camp in San Diego, went to Virginia, met all different types of people. I told you the town I grew up in was very homogeneous, and in the Navy there was all walks of life. Tall